Thanks so much for the response on my previous tutorials. It's been really great. You guys asked for it, so I'm going to give you my basic photo studio with Octane Render and Cinema 4D. Let's do it. So let's have a look at a standard 3-point lighting system. So if you just Google 3-point lighting, it'll give you a really nice overview if you want to look into further how many people set up a basic lighting scenario. So you would have your subject pointing at the camera over here, your main or key light pointing at the object, your fill light, usually about half just to fill in so there's no deep dark shadows from the key light, and then a hair light or a rim light that is outlining or highlighting the edges, defining the edges of the subject from the background. So I'm not going to do exactly this 3-point lighting, it's not to my taste. I'll take you through my version of what I usually set up, and you'll see the difference. I usually like a bit more of a side lighting, but I'll just show you. So let's get into it. First, I'm just going to select the objects, go to sphere, just so I've got a basic object that my whole scene will rotate around and it's in like the default center position. So if I select object, turn off render perfect, segments to 48. I'm also going to create a null object, and I'm going to rename it to target null. Select this to bring up my different views. So that target null is right in the center in the default of my scene. Select this to enlarge the scene, and you'll see what that's for in a minute. So first, what I'd like to do is create a camera. So let me fire up Octane Live Viewer. So this is the default I get with Octane. I've got no lights, no background, no nothing. Select object, Octane camera. So it's going to drop in Octane camera in the direction that I've been looking at through my viewer. But I'm going to zero out all these coordinates anyway. So select the camera, I want to choose a 50mm lens and go to the coordinates and just zero out those coordinates. So you can see now it's zeroed out. I want to zero out these coordinates as well. So let me just go 0, 0. I'm getting as default and basic as I can. And yeah, that's fine. I might make the Z minus 500. So now if I select my perspective, select the little icon, it's going to look through the camera, and we can see our sphere is front and center. And we can see from these angles, it's pointing there. Now the focus plane is way beyond the sphere. If I select the F here and then press it on the object, it'll bring the focus plane directly where I've pressed on that object. So sweet, now I've got my camera. Next, I'm going to create a backdrop. So I'm going to use, let me drag this out of the way, going to use the right viewport for that. I'm going to use a pen tool, and I want snapping on, so I enable snapping. I want to select the work plane snap, and then make sure grid point snapping is on. I just turned it off, I just want to turn it on again. So essentially we're just going to make a backdrop. So I want it to start behind the camera, and so we're all following along. Let's make it sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grid spots down, and you can see it's snapping to the point, which is what we want, to make a nice straight line. 5, let's make it even on the back, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about there, and nice and high, maybe there. Press spacebar to end that, select the first point, and then just delete that. Now select this corner point. We want a nice curved edge, so right click and select chamfer, then click and drag, and it will start the chamfer. You can see that the chamfer is starting there. Come across to our radius and increase that radius till it gets to about there, a couple of 1, 2 squares from where we started from, and that gives us a nice curved edge for our backdrop. So next I want to come over here and select extrude and drag that spline into the extrude. Select the extrude. Let's drag this up here. So select the extrude. Now at the moment it's default to 20 in the Z axis, and I don't want it there. I want that to be 0, and I want it to extrude along the X axis. You can see it moving along there. So let's make that, say, 2400. And now I want to move the whole thing. Let me choose my model and move selection tool, but I can just select it, coordinates minus 1200. So now if I zoom out from this window, you can see it's placed exactly, it's centered in the middle of the object, which is exactly what we want. Great. I'm going to double click on that and rename it Cyclo. Excellent. So if I select my perspective window, then deselect the camera, you can see kind of what we've got so far. So next I want to add some lights. Come to my Octane window, objects. First I'm going to add a Hdr Environment, which is an Octane sky. I'm going to bring the power of that Octane sky down to 0.2, just so it gives me some, I'll drag it to 0, you see no lights. 0.2 just gives me a little bit of fill light so I can see what I'm working with. Octane, actually before I do that, so this is why we've got this target null. Select the target null, select object, Octane targeted area light. So what's that's going to do is it has this tag, which is a target object, and you can see target null is selected in there. So if I move this light around, it will always point at the target null, which the sphere is right on top of. See, it's always targeting that sphere, which will make our job a little bit easier. So for the first light, let's make it the key light. I like my key light nice and big, so let's choose the Octane light tag there, and this icon here, you just look down here where the power distribution is, they're empty. If you click on this, it sets those with some defaults, which gives it a bit more of a nicer drop off, a bit more of a natural. I found it's a bit more of a natural light drop off. So select that, select your Octane light again, come across into details, and you can just choose these points here to, you can see how that's affecting the light as I drag it bigger and smaller, move it around. I'm just going to deselect the snapping so it's a bit smoother. But for the purposes of the tutorial, I'm going to plug in some numbers so we can all follow along. So details, outer radius, let's make that 200. Nice and big. You can see the relationship there to the object. Size, keep that 400. Let's make the Y size 1200. Okay, that is our key light done. Just going to position it. So let me just zoom out a bit from there. Yeah, that's looking good. So in coordinates, drag the Y positioning up and down so it's the pitch angle here, P for pitch, is about -20, we'll say. Doesn't have to be perfect, but around -20. And if we drag the X axis there, get that, so that's around 50. It was already around 50, but somewhere about there. And then drag the Z depth, so we're about at 500 on the X. Yeah, so that gives us our first light. Control C, Control V to copy that light, and it copies the target null. So it's like if I drag it around, you can see it's always trying to point at the target, which is exactly what we want. So this fill light, I want it about half the size. So let's go to the details once again. Fill 60. That X is fine. The size Y, let's make that 240. And I like to have this quite close to the side. So I've positioned that close to the side. So let's go to the coordinates, something close to -88, and similar to the key light, something maybe like -20 here in the pitch. So we have something like that. Once again, Control C, Control V to copy that, and I'm going to drag a light to the opposite side. Drag it up to about there, and this is going to be what they had in the diagram as the hair light or the rim light. I just like it to be off the side, but this is a more smaller focused light. So the bigger the area of light, the softer the shadows, the smaller the light, the sharper the shadows will be. So this is what this light will be for. So let's make this a backlight, and details, radius 30 centimeters, quite small. We can keep 60 and 120, that's fine. But what we want to do is select the tag and come to the power and make that 1000 really bright. So that's our 3 main lights. I also like to add another light onto the actual backdrop itself, and because our lights are free, I like to add 2. So this time I don't want these lights targeted at the null, targeted at the sphere, so I'm just going to add some new lights. Octane area light. You can see, just so you can see it, there it is there. It's quite bright. I'm going to bring the power back to 5. Really quite small. I'm going to up the size to 300. And let's make the size Y 800, just a bit higher in the vertical. This light is going to be off to the side. So let me go to coordinates, plug in -30, puts a bit on a bit of an angle, and let's put the coordinates at -650 and 650, and the Z at 300. So there it is right there. I want to put another one of those exactly on the opposite side, about there. So this is going to be 650 in the X position. So now if I select perspective, select the icon to zoom in my camera, I've got a nice, let me just select the sphere object, 64, just so it's a nice round default sphere. And we've got our basic light setup right there. I'm going to tidy up a little bit. So select this, actually let me drag out, so I've got some renaming space. Key, this was our fill, this one was our, we'll call it back or hair or rim or whatever you want to call it. This one here is our background left, and this one is our background right. We've got the sky, cyclo, camera, target null, beautiful. Let's select all those, hold down Shift and select them, not the sphere, Alt G to group those into a null. We'll call this Basic Studio. And there we have our Basic Studio. And what we can do with that, once we have our Basic Studio, we can save that as a preset so it's ready for us to use whenever we like. So how can we do that? Select Window, Content Browser, and in the Content Browser you'll see presets. Come up to File, New Preset Library. And let's call this, it's going to add a new folder to the preset, so let's call it Studio Rig. There it is. And all we do is we grab our Basic Studio, we drop it into there. Now if we close that off, if we close everything down, not even going to save. Do you want to save the changes? No. So I've started again. I've just lost everything I've worked on. I refresh that Octane window just to show. But just say we were starting a new project from scratch. Here is our sphere. I just realized there's one thing I wanted to add to that studio rig, but we can do that later on. 64. So you go to your tab over here, Content Browser, and you'll probably be met with something like this, Presets. Find your studio rig, Basic Studio, and there you go. It will populate. Go to Objects. Populates our scene with all those elements, even the camera if we look through there. And that you can just roll with that. The thing I wanted to add, I like to also add a default Octane texture. Let me just delete that and do that again. So if you come to Materials, Octane Diffuse Material, and I'm just going to drop that onto my cyclorama. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me double click that, and I'm going to make this 75% gray, and I'll just call that 75% gray. So it's just nice to have that as a starting material when I open up new files. So what I can do, let me redo that before. So Content Browser. Let me see if I can just delete that one. Yes, drag this one in. So that's saved now with the backdrop. Just let me test that by going to Content Browser again, double click. Yep, and it's put in a new texture. If I come to Objects, select my camera again, beautiful. And that's it. That's the basics of saving a basic Photo Studio 3-point lighting setup. And what I like about this setup is, if I zoom out here, I've got a flat background, well lit, but I've got lots of options. So if I want a shadow underneath, I just select the cyclorama, make sure I've got my model and position tools selected, and I just drag it up, and then I've got a floor with nice shadows. I can double click the texture, and then I've got a simple color change that was really quick. And I can undo that if I want gray. Let me take the backdrop out again. Or if I want to change my lights around, just say I want no key light. I can select the Octane Sky, put it to 0, so there's totally no fill lighting or default lighting. Take the background off, and I've got all these different options. Just have one light source, just have the fill light source, just have the side lighting, or I can just turn on just the key light, or just highlight the background. Also, if you want to load, so let me put this back to 0.2. If you want to load a HDRI, so just say I have a glossy, let's make this really glossy, select index, put this right up, I'll drag this to my sphere, so I've got a glossy material. If I want to get some reflection, we can see already the studio floor is reflecting in this sphere, but I can come to Octane Sky, select the tag, image texture, and just search Studio HDRI on Google. It'll come up with something. I've got a few I've already downloaded. Open up that one. No, I don't want to save it. And you can see the reflections are in the ball. I can increase the intensity of that if I like, but I like to drop it down to 0.5 or something a bit less. But I usually don't even, unless I've got something particularly glossy I want to reflect, I don't even use that at all. I just have it on default fill, and that is usually good enough for me. Let's bring that back down. Specular 0.2, roughness 0.2. You just have a default beautiful studio lighting rig. I hope that helped you guys out, and it's hopefully will speed up your process in doing your work. You can obviously customize this rig however you like. You can do a standard 3-point lighting system or do your own custom lighting system and then just save it as a preset, and it will save you lots of time in the future with numerous different objects. So I hope you like that, guys, and I'll catch you later. Bye.